I stood outside the courthouse with nothing left but the outfit I was wearing and a large brown envelope stuffed with legal papers that declared I had officially lost it all. My wife had just walked away with our $3.4 million estate, half of every asset I owned, and a satisfied little grin that looked like she had just won a championship. As we exited through the heavy glass doors, she leaned close. For a moment, I thought she might whisper something gentle, maybe a few words about the years we had shared, but she didn't. Instead, she locked eyes with me and said quietly, "You're pathetic." That single word cut deeper than anything her attorney had thrown at me inside the courtroom. Then she walked away with Julian, the man who had been my closest friend since I was 20. He didn't even bother to glance back. Later that night, I pulled my truck into the shadows behind a roadside diner off Route 9, curled myself up in the driver's seat, and tried to piece together where my life had gone so wrong. Close to midnight, my phone rang. Unknown caller. I nearly ignored it, but some instinct told me to pick up. On the other end was a calm, steady voice. "Mr. Rourke, we've been attempting to contact you for the past 15 years. This is the Gallon Private Banking Group in Antwerp. We have reason to believe you are the rightful heir to an account established under the name Franklin Rourke." I froze. My uncle Franklin had vanished almost 20 years earlier. The caller then read off an account number, paused, and continued, "Mr. Rourke, the current balance in this account stands at $47 million. My chest was still pounding when the man added, "There is something important you should understand about how these funds ended up here. My name is Gabriel Rourke. I am 51 years old, and up until last year I believed I had a stable life. I wasn't wealthy by most people's definition, but I had worked tirelessly to build something real. For 3 decades I labored in construction, swinging hammers, pouring foundations with my own hands, and earning each dollar through sweat, strain, and broken knuckles. I believed in loyalty, in family, in waking up early, and going to bed tired. I thought that was enough to keep a life together. Vivian and I met when we were teenagers. I was 21 when we got married. She had this fire in her eyes and a way of lighting up a room without saying much. I fell for her fast and hard. We didn't have much back then, just a 1-bedroom apartment near Camden, some second-hand furniture, and big dreams. I'd take any job I could find: roofing, framing, remodeling. Vivian worked at a diner during the day and studied nursing at night. We were a team in those early years. We celebrated our first tax return like it was a lottery win. We built our credit, bought a beat-up house, and poured everything into fixing it up. I'd work until my fingers bled, and she'd bring me lemonade and sandwich halves, sitting on the front porch and talking about the future. I loved her. I truly did. Eventually, I started my own crew. Word spread. I got bigger jobs, higher bids. One year I landed a city contract that changed everything. We went from scraping by to actually having something. That was when I surprised her with the mansion. It wasn't some flashy glass-covered palace. It was a classic brick estate with ivy crawling up the sides and tall trees surrounding it like a fortress. Briarwood County. Quiet, peaceful, 5 bedrooms, a wine cellar we never used, and a garden Vivian said she'd fill with lavender but never did. It cost $3.4 million. I paid most of it in cash and financed the rest. I thought I was giving her a dream. She called it a real home, but something shifted after that. Vivian started to change. She joined some country club group, then some charity board. Her hair was always done. She started talking more about wine tastings and less about dinner at home. I chalked it up to growth. People change. I figured maybe I just needed to catch up. Still, I tried to keep our life simple. I spent weekends with my daughter Adriana. She's 23 now, a brilliant girl with my stubborn streak and her mother's wit. We'd watch movies, walk the dogs, fish off the dock when we could. My mother, Lorraine, still lives in the house I grew up in just outside Trenton. Every Sunday after church, I'd bring her over to the mansion for dinner, even when Vivian wasn't thrilled about it. Then there was Julian. He was more than just a friend. We'd been through everything together. We'd built decks, hunted deer, helped each other move furniture, and drank beer under the stars. When my father passed away, Julian was the one who held my mother's hand at the funeral when I couldn't find the words. I trusted him more than I trusted my own brother. I would have taken a bullet for him. I never saw what was happening. Maybe I didn't want to. Vivian and Julian started spending more time together, charity events, late-night planning meetings. She said I was too tired, that I was always working. I didn't argue. I just kept going, thinking if I worked harder, she'd see how much I still loved her. But the distance between us grew. We stopped talking about anything real. She slept in the guest room more nights than not. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how we got so far from those days on the porch eating sandwiches. I kept thinking about something my Uncle Franklin told me when I was 17. He was the odd one in the family, drove a Bentley, wore cufflinks to Thanksgiving. He once looked me in the eye and said, "Gabe, never think a roof means safety. Sometimes it just keeps the truth from falling on your head." I didn't understand it back then. I do now. The real collapse wasn't a moment. It was a slow erosion. Trust wore down like stone in a river. I kept hoping Vivian would turn back around, that we'd find a way to fix it. But she was already gone emotionally, mentally, spiritually. All that was left was the paperwork. And even then, I didn't expect her to go as far as she did. I didn't see the storm coming until it hit full force. It was a Thursday. I remember that clearly because I always came home early on Thursdays. I'd been working a job in Hartford, a large deck extension with custom cedar planks. I wrapped up early, drove straight home, boots caked in dried mud, back aching, ready to surprise Vivian with her favorite cannoli from that Italian place she liked in White Plains. I had this stupid idea that maybe we could sit outside together, talk like we used to, maybe find a little spark to hang on to. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed Julian's truck parked near the garage. Nothing strange about that. He came by now and then, helped me with odd repairs, sometimes dropped off wild game after a hunting trip. But something felt off. The house was too quiet, the air too still. I walked in through the back, past the kitchen, and I heard a laugh. It was soft, muffled, coming from upstairs. Her laugh. That same laugh she used to give me when I tickled her behind the knees. The one that made her eyes wrinkle at the corners. But it wasn't meant for me this time. I didn't storm up the stairs. I didn't yell. I didn't want to believe what my gut was already screaming. I walked up slowly, each step heavier than the last. When I reached the bedroom door, I heard Julian's voice, then hers again. I opened the door. There they were, my wife, my best friend. No shame, no panic. Just the kind of quiet that follows when two people know they've been caught but don't care enough to explain it. Julian scrambled to pull on his shirt. Vivian didn't move. She just sat on the edge of the bed and looked at me. Her face didn't change. Not a flicker of guilt. She crossed her legs, fixed her hair, and said in the calmest voice I'd ever heard, "You're early." Julian tried to say something. I don't remember the word, something hollow, something weak. I wasn't listening. I turned and walked out. I didn't scream. I didn't punch the wall. I went down to the garage, sat on a stack of plywood, and stared at the floor for what felt like an hour. Everything that had been brewing over the last few years suddenly made sense. The late nights, the fake smiles, the way she started pulling away from my daughter, from my mother, from me. That night, I slept in the guest room. The cannoli stayed in its box on the counter. The next morning, it was in the trash, and Vivian had filed for divorce. There was no argument, no begging, no pretending. She was done, and she wanted what she thought was hers. Half, more than half if she could get it. I tried to be civil. I told her we could settle quietly. She laughed and said, "You're the builder, not the brain. Let the court decide." She hired one of the most expensive divorce attorneys in the state, a sharp, cold man named Donovan. Clean suit, white teeth, eyes like a shark. He shredded my reputation in court. Claimed I was emotionally unstable. Said I had a temper. Twisted the truth until it barely resembled our life. They painted me as a controlling workaholic who neglected his wife. They pulled text messages out of context, called on 2 former subcontractors who had sued me over a payment dispute years ago. They even subpoenaed my financial records from a tough year in the recession to suggest I'd been hiding assets. I sat there, suit too tight around my neck, watching my life get torn apart in front of strangers. Vivian didn't cry, not once. She wore a black dress, hair pinned up, legs crossed like she was attending a fashion show instead of a courtroom. When Adriana testified, trying to speak for me, trying to say her mother had changed, Vivian wouldn't even look at her. After 9 long months of hearings and legal battles, the judge issued his ruling. The mansion was hers. Most of our savings, hers. Retirement account split. My tools, my truck, and the small, sparse apartment I'd rented just to have a roof over my head. That was what I got. I wasn't surprised by the decision. I was surprised by how empty I felt when it came down. Not angry, not sad, just numb, like I'd been watching someone else's story play out and I was just the guy in the background. Outside the courthouse, I stood alone. Julian was nowhere in sight. I imagined he was already inside the mansion helping Vivian celebrate. Maybe pouring champagne into the crystal glasses I had unpacked the day we moved in. Vivian walked past me with her lawyer beside her. She looked over at me just once. No emotion, no hesitation. She leaned in and whispered it, "You're pathetic." Then she turned and walked away. I didn't chase her. I didn't say a word. I walked to the parking garage, climbed into my truck, and sat behind the wheel with my hands still shaking. I had lost my wife, my best friend, my home, and the future I spent 30 years building. But that night, everything was about to change. I couldn't face the white walls and stale air of that rented apartment. Instead, I drove north. I didn't have a plan, just a need to get away from the city, from everything that reminded me of what I had lost. Around 10 p.m., I pulled into a diner parking lot off Route 9, killed the engine, and leaned my head back. The phone rang. Unknown number. I let it ring twice before answering. My first thought was that it might be the court, or maybe Vivian calling to rub in what she had taken. I almost hung up. A man with a calm European accent asked, "Is this Gabriel Rourke?" I hesitated. "Who's asking?" "This is Simon Keller with Gallon Private Banking Group, Antwerp. We've been trying to reach you for several years. Are you the nephew of Franklin Rourke?" My uncle Franklin hadn't crossed my mind in a long time. He had been my father's older brother, the oddball in a family of carpenters and farmers. He wore expensive suits, smoked Cuban cigars, and had this air about him like he knew something the rest of us didn't. He came around once every few years, handed me crisp $100 bills on my birthday, and then disappeared again. He hadn't been seen since I was in my 20s. Rumor was he moved to Europe, made a fortune, then vanished. I cleared my throat. Yeah, Franklin was my uncle. Why? The man continued, "Mr. Rourke, you are the sole listed beneficiary to a dormant account. We are required to contact you before its automatic liquidation. The account has not been touched for 15 years. Your uncle gave specific instructions to release the funds only after a certain legal condition had been met." "What condition?" I asked. The man replied, "We were to wait until you were no longer legally bound by a marriage license." The words hit like a gust of cold air. I sat up straighter. "What kind of funds are we talking about?" There was a pause. "The account contains $47,894,421.77 as of this evening's statement." I didn't speak. I couldn't. My hand started to tremble. I looked down at the dashboard like the numbers might appear there, confirming what I had just heard. The man asked if I was still on the line. I said, "Yes, barely." He explained that my uncle had transferred a series of off-the-book investments, including private equities and old-world banking bonds, into this account over a span of 10 years before vanishing from the financial world. The money had grown slowly, consistently, waiting in a vault protected by silence and legal shielding. I asked why I hadn't been contacted earlier. Your uncle was meticulous. He did not trust your spouse's words, not mine. He instructed us to wait until your marital status changed. He said, and I quote, "Gabe needs to be free before he remembers who he is." The phrase stunned me. I remembered Franklin saying something similar when I was a teenager, back when I thought he was just a flashy old man with too many secrets. He had taken me fishing once when I was 16, and I remembered him saying, "Money's just a mirror, kid. It'll show you what you're made of. Just make sure you know who you are when you see the reflection." The banker continued, "We require your physical presence in Antwerp to process final identification and paperwork. We will cover all travel and accommodation expenses. The funds can be transferred wherever you designate." I didn't say yes right away. I told him I needed time. He understood and gave me a direct contact number. After the call, I sat there in the dark cab of my truck, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing in my life. I looked up at the stars through the windshield. Somewhere out there, my entire reality had just shifted. But I didn't feel powerful. I felt small, confused, caught between two lives. I called my mother the next morning and told her everything. She didn't react with excitement or disbelief. She just said, "That man always did no more than he let on. Maybe now you can finally breathe." Adriana was the next person I called. She was quiet for a while, then said, "Dad, you deserve this, but don't let it turn you into someone you're not." I booked a flight to Antwerp that afternoon. No hesitation. I packed a duffel bag with 2 pairs of jeans, 3 shirts, a worn leather wallet, and the watch my father gave me when I graduated high school. I left everything else behind. I didn't tell Vivian. She didn't deserve to know. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need a courtroom. What I needed was to find out what my uncle left me. Not just the money, but the reason. Because something told me this wasn't just about dollars in a bank account. It was about something much deeper. The plane landed in Antwerp on a gray Monday morning. The city looked like a postcard. Clean streets, old stone buildings, sharp suits everywhere. I hadn't been outside the country since my honeymoon to Mexico. And now here I was walking through a Belgian airport with a bank invitation tucked in my coat pocket. A driver met me at arrivals. Black Mercedes. He held a sign with my name and greeted me with a firm handshake and a polite nod. No small talk. He drove straight through the heart of the city and up a hill overlooking the Scheldt River. The car stopped in front of a stone building with tall iron gates and gold letters etched into the arch, Gallon Private Banking Group. Inside, everything smelled like leather and fresh polish. I was escorted through a long hallway into a private office that looked more like a library. Mahogany bookshelves, a massive globe, and a view of the river that could quiet your soul. A man in his early 60s stepped forward with a warm smile and introduced himself as Simon Keller, the same man from the phone. "Mr. Rourke, welcome. We've been waiting a long time for you." He poured me coffee, handed me a thick folder, and began to explain everything. Uncle Franklin hadn't just vanished. He had intentionally removed himself from the American financial system. He had taken his investments, sold his properties, and moved his capital into a trust protected under multiple foreign jurisdictions. He had used shell companies, old money channels, and insider banking codes. It wasn't illegal, but it was extremely private. The folder held letters, real handwritten letters from Franklin addressed to me, locked away until my divorce was finalized. In the first letter, he wrote, "Gabe, I know this won't make sense right away. But I've watched you from a distance. I saw how hard you worked. I saw the kind of man you became. I always wanted to leave you something. Not just money, but freedom. I couldn't give it to you while you were married to that woman. I'm sorry, but I never trusted her. I saw through her long before you did. Another letter included a journal entry from years earlier when I was just a kid. Franklin had written, "Gabe builds with his hands. He thinks with his heart. He'll be a better man than I ever was." I had to stop reading. My eyes welled up. For years, I thought Franklin had forgotten about us. Turns out he had been planning something the entire time, something for me. Simon slid a document across the table. It authorized the full release of the funds into any account I named. He explained the total assets, including stocks, gold holdings, and a private villa in the south of France that was technically also mine. My hands shook as I signed. Just like that, my life changed again. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about what came next. The flight home was different. I wasn't the same man who left. The bitterness from the divorce hadn't disappeared, but something had shifted inside me. I felt grounded again. Not because I had millions, but because I finally understood that I hadn't lost everything. I had just been stripped down to who I really was. The first call I made when I landed was to Adriana. I told her everything. She didn't ask for anything. She only said, "Does this mean you're coming back home?" I told her yes. But home wouldn't be that empty apartment, and it definitely wouldn't be the mansion my ex-wife now lived in with my ex-best friend. I bought a ranch house outside Richmond. It had open land, a wraparound porch, and enough space for Adriana to visit anytime she wanted. I fixed it up myself, installed the windows, laid the flooring, built the deck. Every nail went in with purpose. A week later, Vivian found out. She called. I let it ring. She called again. This time, I answered. "Gabe," she said, her voice softer than I'd heard in years. "I made a mistake. I never stopped loving you." I was angry and confused. "We could try again." I let her talk. Then I replied, "You didn't love me when I had everything. You loved what I gave you. Now you want back in because I'm worth more on paper. I'm not the same man you walked away from." She started to cry. I waited. Then I said, "I forgive you, Vivian, but I'll never forget what you said to me outside that courtroom, and it'll never be yours again." I hung up. Julian tried calling too. He left a message, "Gabe, man to man, I messed up. Things got complicated. I should have been honest." I deleted it without listening to the rest. I didn't need apologies. I didn't need revenge. I needed peace. And I found it. The final gift my uncle left behind wasn't stacks of Swiss currency or deeds to land. It was clarity. He recognized what I was blind to. He gave me the tools to start over, not just to build walls or refill a bank account, but to create a life that truly belonged to me again. And this time, I swore I would not waste a single heartbeat of it. Most mornings, I still rise before the sun. Old routines never die easily. But instead of rushing out in steel-toed boots with a thermos of bitter coffee, I sit quietly on the porch of my new place and let the stillness wash over me. The house is modest, nothing extravagant. It's a ranch-style home with a gravel drive stretching long, a weathered oak tree standing tall in front, and a creaking porch swing I crafted with my own hands. I don't need marble entryways or glittering chandeliers. All I need is honesty, peace, and the kind of quiet that carries no shame or regret. Adriana comes by often. She brings along her guitar, perches on the porch rail, and strums melodies while I cook steaks on the grill or sip from my coffee mug. She shares stories about her ambitions, her dreams, her vision of opening a small cafe one day. I offered to bankroll it, but she insisted on doing it on her own. That's how I know she'll succeed. There's fire in her spirit, but it burns steady. In her I see the best of both her parents, my resilience, and her mother's determination. I only hope she learns to love with more wisdom than we managed. My mother, Lorraine, still lives in the old house where I grew up. She refuses to move, though I promised her something newer, bigger, easier. She simply says, "Everything I need is already here." I understand now. Moving forward doesn't always mean upgrading. Sometimes, staying rooted in the right place is the truest progress. Vivian never reached out again. Julian never knocked on my door. The path they chose is theirs alone. I don't wish them suffering, but I no longer carry the weight of their story. The past months have been about learning to breathe in the stillness. I adopted a dog, a shepherd mix named Boone, who never leaves my side. I joined a local veterans association not because I served, but to volunteer and lend a hand. I've found peace in using my skills to build for others, ramps for the disabled, decks for families, benches for public parks. It reminds me that the labor of your hands matters, whether your bank account is full or empty. I also made a choice. I set aside part of the inheritance and created a foundation, the Rourke Grant, dedicated to helping single fathers find their footing after divorce. I can never forget those nights curled up in my truck, not knowing where to go, convinced the world had shut me out. No man should have to face that kind of loneliness. If I can help even one find his way back, then maybe every loss and every gain will carry a deeper meaning. The most valuable lesson I've taken from this is simple: your worth isn't defined by what slips through your fingers or what you manage to accumulate. It's defined by what you are able to rebuild when you are stripped bare. Money didn't mend me. It didn't erase betrayal or heal scars. But it handed me another chance. And I used it to reclaim the man I once was before life had worn me down. So if you're listening and you've been broken, if someone abandoned you or took everything you thought made you who you are, I want you to hear me clearly: there is a part of you that cannot be taken. It still lives inside you. You only have to dig deep enough to uncover it. And when you find it, guard it, build upon it, and let it guide you back home. Thank you for staying with me through my story. If these words touched you, if they stirred something in you or made you reflect on your own journey, I ask only 3 small things. Like the video so others can find it. Leave a comment, share your story, or simply tell me what struck you the hardest. Subscribe because more stories are coming, and you won't want to miss what's ahead. This isn't where my journey ends. It's where something far greater begins. And I'm grateful you're here to share it with me.